This film is based on real events. It begins with a couple riding a motorcycle into the parking area of a garage. However, when they try to leave the garage, they see something so horrifying that they scream in terror and run away. In the next scene, we are introduced to a police officer named Eva, who receives a call from her colleague Bernie, informing her that a man's body has been found. Soon, Eva arrives at the crime scene, and we learn that the date is August 16th, 2017. She then goes to the same garage where the body of a man has been discovered. The poor man has been brutally stabbed multiple times, and the police initially assume it was a robbery that turned violent. Eva carefully analyzes the scene and, given the savage nature of the crime, becomes convinced that it was not a robbery. Then one of the officers reveals that the victim's name was Arturo Ferrer, who was 36 years old. Outside the crime scene, Eva meets a woman named Mage, who turns out to be Arturo's wife. The officer gives her the tragic news, leaving the woman visibly shaken and distressed. When asked when she last saw him, Mage says it was just last night, explaining that she came home from her night shift and tried calling him all morning, but Arturo never answered. The poor woman breaks down in tears. Therefore, Eva tells a man who appears to be her friend to take Mage to the station once she calms down. After some time, Eva meets the forensic expert who states that there were 6 stab wounds, 4 to the chest and 2 directly to the heart. The expert explains that Arturo couldn't even react or defend himself, indicating that the killer was an extremely strong man. Eva concludes that the brutality of this crime was not random, but the result of personal rage. When Eva returns to the station, she notices that Mage is waiting for her. Eva finds it strange that Mage appears completely calm and is busy with her phone, while Bernie sighs and remarks that this is how the younger generation is. Eva continues the interrogation, and Mage explains how her friend Sonia mentioned one of Arturo's co-workers whom she had met at the gym. Apparently, this co-worker was overly interested in Arturo, and Mage indirectly suggests that they might have had a relationship. Mage also reveals that Sonia is currently in the waiting room. Later, Eva speaks with Sonia, who says that the co-worker only had an interest in Arturo and nothing more. Sonia also reveals how controlling Arturo was toward Mage, and that she had to pretend to work extra shifts just to spend time with her friends. Sonia admits she never personally knew Arturo, and everything she knows comes from what Mage told her. At this point, Sonia unintentionally mentions that Mage has another man in her life named Daniel, with whom she is very close. Eva realizes this suggests an affair and later instructs her team to investigate Daniel. Later, she shares this situation with her team and learns that Mage will receive about €1,000 per month as a widow's pension, which makes Eva suspicious. However, since the forensic report confirms that the killer was a man, Eva assumes the murderer must be Mage's lover. The next scene cuts to Arturo's funeral, where Eva arrives and witnesses Mage delivering a tearful speech. At that very moment, Bernie calls Eva and informs her that Mage lied about working a night shift at the time of the incident. In the next scene, Eva goes to Mage's parents' house to meet the grieving widow. The two speak privately, and Mage admits that she had a relationship with Daniel but didn't mention it earlier because she didn't think it was relevant to the murder. She also reveals that a month before her wedding, she had a relationship with another man named Andre, which Arturo and his entire family had found out about. At that time, many people stopped speaking to her, but Arturo eventually forgave her. Mage begs Eva not to tell anyone about Daniel because she fears Arturo's family might kill her this time. Eva does not judge her and realizes that Mage lied about the night shift because she was with her lover. Nevertheless, the officer remains suspicious and asks her boss to tap Mage's phone calls. The boss agrees, and Eva's team begins actively monitoring Mage's conversations. They hear numerous calls and are surprised to discover that Mage pretends to still be grieving her husband and appears distressed, while in reality, she happily chats and laughs with men. Mage is not saddened by her husband's death and feels no grief over it. Moreover, she seems especially close to Daniel and has even told her mother about her intimate relationship with him. 37 days after the murder, Mage finally confesses to Daniel that she is married, but her husband was mysteriously murdered just a few weeks ago. This news devastates Daniel, and he asks how she was able to deceive him while they were looking for an apartment together. One day, Eva's life is drastically changed when her colleague Bernie is accidentally killed during a violent confrontation with a criminal. This news deeply affects her, as they had been partners for years and were very close. Shortly after, the chief commissioner informs Eva that Mage's case is no longer classified as a murder investigation and has been handed over to the organized crime unit. Eva tries to protest, but the commissioner refuses to change his decision. 2 months later, Eva receives a call from one of her team members who reveals that despite the commissioner's orders, they have continued monitoring Mage's phone calls. It turns out they have found a major clue. They discover that Mage is speaking with a new person named Salva about the incident. Both sound nervous, and Salva mentions that he has spoken to a police friend, which immediately frightens Mage. The next sequence cuts to a flashback to September 2016, 1 year before the murder. We see Mage and Arturo's wedding. The couple appears excited, but Arturo's family looks unhappy and wonders how their son could forgive such a betrayal. As their marriage progresses, we see that Arturo is genuinely kind but seems cold and dissatisfied. Mage works in several places as a nurse, which mentally exhausts her. During this time, we learn that she is having an affair with a co-worker, the same one who comforted her after Arturo's death. One night, we see Mage and Sonia at a club, drinking and having fun. Suddenly, Mage becomes sad and tells Sonia how controlling and abusive her husband is. After expressing her fabricated problems, Mage claims she has to go home and says goodbye to her friend. However, in reality, we see her arriving at another lover's house, Andre, where they become intimate. A few days later, she attends a party where she meets Daniel and eventually spends an intimate night with him. It seems that the two develop a strong attraction to each other. Therefore, unlike her other lovers, Mage decides not to tell Daniel that she is married. In the following days, their relationship grows even closer. They spend a lot of time together, and one night, while at Arturo's house, Arturo complains that his wife is always at work and that it's even difficult to see her. At that moment, Mage receives a message from Daniel, which Arturo accidentally notices. The honest man asks who the message is from, but Mage accuses him of invading her privacy. She snatches the phone from him, but Arturo realizes the truth and angrily demands that she leave the house. He also asks for a divorce, which enrages Mage so much that she physically attacks him before leaving. When she arrives at the hospital, the unstable woman texts Andre, claiming that her husband severely abuses her and that she can no longer tolerate it. She indirectly tries to persuade Andre to get rid of Arturo. However, to her disappointment, Andre appears rational and tells her to report the matter to the police. In the next scene, we are introduced to another lover, Salva, an older man and her co-worker. The two spend time together, and Mage breaks down in tears, talking about her husband's supposed violence and how seriously she is thinking about ending her life. Salva tries to comfort her, and Mage says she wishes her husband were dead. She then begs Salva to do it for her and insists that once Arturo is gone, nothing will come between them. However, the older man is horrified by such a request and gives no response. The scene cuts to 1 month before the murder, when Mage goes to Salva's workplace and asks why he hasn't contacted her for a month. She tells him that her husband is out of town tonight and invites him to her house, which he eagerly accepts. That night, after spending some time together, Mage manipulates Salva and claims that Arturo is becoming increasingly violent. Salva suggests divorce, but Mage angrily says her husband would never allow it and accuses Salva of not truly loving her. At this point, the older man reassures her and eventually agrees to do whatever she asks. After that, Mage takes him to the garage and carefully explains what time her husband usually leaves for work and where he typically parks his car. She also gives Salva a copy of the garage remote and instructs him to hide inside and wait for the right moment to attack. A few days later, we see Salva at his home spending time with his wife and teenage son when he suddenly receives a call from Mage. She speaks kindly at first and then mentions the ideal day to carry out the crime. August 16th. Salva's face tightens with hesitation, but the cunning woman manages to convince him while also emphasizing that she loves him and wants to be with him forever. In the next scene, we see Salva riding his motorcycle toward Arturo's building. He then nervously opens the garage door using the remote Mage had given him. Salva notices several neighbors entering, but he manages to hide until they leave. Shortly after, Arturo finally enters the garage, and without wasting any time, Salva attacks him with a knife. After successfully committing the murder, he immediately leaves the place and gets rid of all the evidence. Salva later informs Mage of the news, and she tells him she will see him later, which makes Salva very excited. When he comes to meet her, he tries to get close to her, but she pulls away and pretends to be grieving over her husband's death. Mage warns him that they must keep their distance because the police are seriously investigating and no connection between them should be discovered. Salva agrees and gives her a prepaid phone so she can contact him secretly if needed. After Salva leaves, Mage immediately drops her role as the grieving widow and texts Daniel, asking to meet that very night to have fun together. The scene shifts to 2 months later, when Salva approaches Mage at work, but she behaves coldly toward him. She says she is stressed because of her husband's insurance paperwork and the mess at home. Hearing this, Salva immediately goes to Mage's apartment and starts cleaning and doing household chores. At one point, Salva opens his laptop to gather information about the insurance, but he is shocked when he discovers Mage's private messages with Daniel, as well as their plan to travel to Italy. This revelation deeply affects the older man, and he realizes he has been used. He decides to leave her for good. A few days later, Mage calls Salva using her regular phone and asks what happened and whether she did something to upset him. Salva says it might be better for them to stay apart because every time he sees her, he remembers that horrible incident. However, Mage says she had already forgotten about that event until Salva brought it up again. Salva then reveals that he contacted his police friend, which immediately terrifies Mage. In the present time, Eva's team listens carefully as Salva explains that he only asked his police friend about the case and that they have detained Andre. Salva also reveals that they have information about someone named Daniel and their upcoming trip to Italy. This clearly worries Mage, and she admits that she meets Daniel because she feels lonely, as Salva has a family and children. She then nervously invites him to meet in person to discuss everything. The older man agrees, unaware that the police are listening to everything and are also planning to go there. Some time later, Mage and Salva meet at a restaurant, while the police closely monitor them. However, since they do not yet have enough evidence, they cannot make an arrest, so for now, they only take photos of the two. Later, Eva visits her boss and shows him the photos along with transcripts of the phone conversations. Eva says they are getting close, and her boss finally allows further action. Elsewhere, it seems that Mage is becoming serious with Daniel, and the two are searching for an apartment together. After that, Arturo's brother calls Eva and asks if there are any updates on the investigation. Eva says they are close to catching the culprit, but asks him not to share this information with anyone outside the family. Later, Mage visits Arturo's parents' house and reveals that she wants to sell her apartment and divide the proceeds. However, Arturo's brother firmly says that they cannot allow the sale until the investigation is complete. Mage argues that this could take years, but the brother responds that the police already have the name of the criminal and are close to arresting him. This news terrifies Mage, and she later calls Salva to inform him. However, Salva reassures her that no one is investigating him and that the police may have another suspect. He tells Mage to stay calm and adds that he hopes she will now have a better life with Daniel. Mage admits that she still thinks about him, and the two agree to meet again in a specific place in a few days. Upon hearing this, the cunning officers decide to plant a hidden microphone inside a tissue in the restaurant to record their conversation. In the next scene, the meeting takes place while the police carefully listen to everything. Mage asks Salva about the remote, but he reassures her that he has already gotten rid of it and tells her not to worry. After that, Eva meets with her boss and says they now have enough evidence to make an arrest. The boss gives permission, and soon after, Eva and her colleagues search across the city for Salva. His last phone call indicates that he is at the hospital, but they cannot find him there. They conclude that someone must have warned him, causing him to try to escape, but eventually they catch him in the hospital cafeteria. The officers move in to arrest him, and Salva calmly surrenders, as if he had been prepared for this moment. Meanwhile, Mage is also arrested outside the apartment where she had been living with Daniel. Mage appears completely shocked, while Daniel is confused about what is happening. The scene then shifts to the police station, where both suspects are interrogated separately. Salva tries to act strong and denies everything, while Mage pretends to be a grieving widow and cries. When Salva realizes that the police have all the evidence, he finally confesses to the crime but insists that Mage had nothing to do with it. He claims that Mage had given him the garage remote earlier, so he could use the parking if needed. On the other hand, Mage turns the blame onto him and says that Salva is a dangerous man who became obsessed with her and probably killed her husband. When Eva presents evidence of their romantic relationship, Mage claims that she only allowed Salva to get close to her occasionally because she was afraid of him. Meanwhile, Salva continues to insist that he acted alone and did everything to protect Mage from her husband's alleged abuse. However, Eva reveals that Arturo never abused her and that everything was a fabricated lie to manipulate him, which shocks Salva. Eva tells him that he could have handled his midlife crisis in other ways, but instead he chose to become a pathetic fool and bring lifelong shame upon his wife and poor son. In the end, both Salva and Mage are sentenced to prison, and the case is finally closed. After this incident, Eva resigns from the Criminal Investigation Unit and transfers to regular police patrol. It is later revealed that during the first month in prison, Mage and Salva exchanged romantic letters. However, when Salva discovers that Mage is involved with other inmates, he requests to change his statement and confesses the full truth during the trial. Initially, Salva is sentenced to 17 years in prison, while Mage receives 22 years. However, Salva's sentence is later reduced due to his cooperation with authorities, while Mage's sentence is increased because of her relationship with the victim.